Some other key features in 8.1.1, we've got Wi-Fi mesh support. This has been something that's been asked about for years. And the really cool thing is this is supported on a lot of our new routers that have 11 AC Wi-Fi. And it's also supported on our Wi-Fi access points that support 802.11 AC Wi-Fi or newer. And so we'll show you more about how this integration works, but it's a great way to take an existing Peplink. If you've got a Balance 20X or a Surf Soho Mark III, again, any Peplink router that has that 11 AC Wi-Fi built into it, all you need to do is buy one more Peplink access point and you can create your own mesh network to wirelessly extend the coverage of that existing router. If you've got a Peplink router that doesn't have built-in Wi-Fi, that's okay. That router can still manage the mesh profiles for any number of other Peplink Wi-Fi access points. So you can still use that non-Wi-Fi enabled Peplink router as the core of your mesh network. And then again, use additional Peplink access points to create that mesh Wi-Fi coverage. And of course, we'll dive into that at the end of this presentation and show you how that works. So we talked about the AP firmware, the router firmware, but we need to talk about the AP firmware as well. Like we said, there's mesh Wi-Fi support and there's this air monitor support. These are both features that are coming out in this new AP1 firmware. And so depending on the generation of your product, whether it's 11AC, 11AC Wave 2, or our newest Wi-Fi 6 access points, we have firmware to support all these great new features that pair up with our routers. So again, this new Wi-Fi access point firmware gives you that mesh support, so you can use these to wirelessly extend your network. We've got that air monitor support, so you can use any access point in your network to be an RF scanner and give you that spectrum analysis capability. And last but not least, we've also added DPI support, so you can get nice reporting from your devices about which applications are being used by which clients. And so this is really cool for areas where maybe you've put a Peplink out there in a large scale hotspot, and it's not really a Peplink router. You've put a Peplink access point to support a large scale distributed Wi-Fi hotspot. You know, maybe you're putting these in coffee shops or restaurants or any number of locations that you may not have control over the overall infrastructure, but just using a single Peplink access point, you can get the DPI support built into that access point instead of needing a larger router to support that capability. Okay, folks, you should be seeing the dashboard of a Balance 20X. If that's not what you're seeing, shout at me in the Q&A. All right, no news is good news. We're gonna keep moving. So this is the Balance 20X. We're going to show you the Wi-Fi mesh capabilities. The Balance 20X, if you're not familiar with it, is an awesome value. This is a $399 router that includes a built-in cellular connection. So here you can see we've got an Ethernet WAN and a cellular WAN. It's also got this Flex Mini slot labeled number 2 here, which in this case is not being used, but it's got the capability to add a second radio to it. So awesome product for $399, but we're going to show you how you can use this product to build a mesh network over Wi-Fi. So if we click over to the AP tab, I've set up a few different things in here already, but we'll just walk through this. I've set up an SSID. It's labeled webinar mesh. This itself isn't specifically the mesh network. This is just the SSID that anybody would connect to. And so we set this up just like any other SSID we would normally do. Nothing special there. Then the next tab down here is the new one. We've got a wireless mesh tab. And so this is where you create your wireless mesh profile. So if we open this up, you create a mesh ID and you select the frequency you want to mesh on and you select the shared key. So really simple. The mesh ID and the shared key need to match on all of your devices, as does the frequency. So you've got 3 settings that you have to be concerned about to get your mesh network up and running. For me personally, I would pretty much always choose to mesh on 5 gigahertz. There's a lot more spectrum available for Wi-Fi in that band versus 2.4. So it's just going to give you a little better performance in general. If you know what you're doing and you want to choose 2.4, go for it. Feel free to try both, see what works well. But again, there's just a lot more room for traffic on 5 gigahertz. So you probably will have a better experience there. Nonetheless, get that set up. Make sure you've got those 3 fields written down so that you can take it to your other devices. Depending on your model and depending on the access point controller capabilities of your model, you may have to take this 3rd step to get the mesh up and running. In my case, on the 20X, you do. So you have to come under the settings and then the access point profile, and you have to enable the mesh profile that you just created. If you don't have that enabled, you'll get a dead giveaway on this wireless mesh tab. This frequency will be grayed out, indicating that it's not actively being used. So if you set this up and you see that grayed out, that's your cue to come check out the settings tab and then look at your access point profile and make sure that it's enabled and of course saved there. So once you've done that, if you've ever used our access point controller, you can use it to push these settings to other access points. So let's say you have 10 access points that you want to get set up in some sort of a mesh configuration. You could log into each one of those, and the access points each have these wireless mesh settings. I can show you that quickly here on another unit. If I remember the password, I don't think I do. Nonetheless, we can get that quickly. This is another nice feature of our access point controller. We standardize all the logins and all that fun stuff so that you don't have access points hanging out there with default passwords and those things. So AP controller is one nice way to manage that. Cover your butt from other problems there. So this unit looks a little bit different on the dashboard. It's almost contradictory here. We've got the WAN, which has an IP address, but it says it's disconnected. So what the heck? Well, this unit's meshed wirelessly right now. So it does have an IP address, but that WAN port is disconnected. So it looks incorrect or strange, but this unit is in mesh mode already. If I come under the AP, just like we saw in the router, there's a section called mesh. And so this is real similar. The only difference is you've got this enable disable box, whereas on the router you had the profile that you had to go enable this mesh setting in. And here it's just one extra setting, but it's all on the same screen. So again, make sure these match. Once you've got that set up, you're good to go. So again, you could log into each of these access points, set that mesh setting up manually. Or if you're into automation, you can plug each of these access points into your router that has the mesh profile and the access point controller feature turned on, and give it about 5 or 10 minutes and they'll sync up and they'll take that mesh profile, and then you could unplug it and go power it up somewhere wirelessly, and it will seek out that mesh network and be ready to deploy. So you've got a couple different ways to speed up that deployment if you're trying to do this on more than one unit. Now we also support WDS. WDS is really a legacy type of configuration. It's like a static mesh. You can achieve wireless extension of coverage, but you have to uniquely program every single link in the chain, and it's not dynamic, not flexible. So it's really cumbersome from a maintenance standpoint to do WDS. So mesh achieves the same benefits, but automates all of those connections again with those 3 shared settings. So much easier to implement. If we look at the access point status tab here, you can see the mesh or WDS info, and you can see the transmit receive rate, how much traffic is pushed over that mesh. Just real simple, just like a Wi-Fi client. If we come back to the router, we can check the mesh status as well. This is under the AP tab here. And we get this nice little simple topology graph. You can see we've got our Wi-Fi mesh. That's the name of this router. That's your base in blue, and then you've got this little wireless link over here to this red dot. This is our meshed access point that we were just logged into. So you can see the duration, uptime, and again, the overall transmit receive rates. So really straightforward, really powerful functionality though. Again, any Peplink router or access point that has 11 AC Wi-Fi or newer will support this feature, and they're interoperable. So if you've got an AC router with a Wave 2 access point, those can play nice together and form this mesh network. Again, this requires the access point and the router firmware to be on the latest versions that we're talking about here. So again, go to the forum and check for those different firmware versions. Again, on the access point, there's 3 different versions depending on your hardware generation. Again, 362 is for the 11AC, 373 is for 11AC Wave 2, and 381 is for our newest Wi-Fi 6 access points. All right, I'm going to pause again and we'll pull up some more demos. Will the Wi-Fi mesh support be supported in the AP1 Enterprise APs? Yes, those are 11 AC capable, so the answer is yes, they get mesh. But can APs mesh with PepWave routers with integrated Wi-Fi 2 or just other PepWave APs? The answer is yes to that question, so long as that PepWave router has 11 AC Wi-Fi in it or better. So again, the Soho Mark III, the Balance 20X, those are good examples of PepWave or Peplink routers that have integrated Wi-Fi that do support the mesh feature. BR1 Mini would be an example of a product that does not support the mesh feature. That's just 11N on the BR1 Mini. Another good one to point out on routers that support mesh is the Transit Duo. That's got the 11 AC Wi-Fi in it as well. So another good choice for Wi-Fi mesh. Another question, does choosing mesh frequency disable clients from connecting on that frequency? In our implementation, no. Sometimes vendors do that. We allow one radio to simultaneously serve both purposes. So again, it might be a little bit counterintuitive to use the same radio for both versus one for clients and one for meshing. But again, with just the overall much larger spectrum on 5 gigahertz, that's usually going to net a better result regardless. But if you mesh on 5 gigahertz, you can definitely only allow clients to connect on 2.4, but it's really your choice to allow that to share both purposes or not. And meshing with SSIDs, the SSID side is really not directly related to the mesh. The mesh is just your backbone to that access point. So each access point can have different SSIDs on it if you want, or if you use the controller to manage that, or just manually program it, they can all have the same SSID and they'll behave just like a wired access point would if users roam from one to the other. See another question, can an AP connected over mesh have wired clients plugged into it and be able to access various networks? I've done it in a real simple test. I've had a device plugged into the Ethernet port of a wirelessly meshed access point, and I've been able to pass the untagged VLAN through. I believe it's a true layer 2 connection, so VLAN tags should pass as well for other SSIDs. I just can't say that I've personally tested that out yet, but you should have that capability as well. See a question about Wi-Fi mesh and using like an all-in-one antenna for cellular and GPS. So a lot of people use, for obvious reasons, the all-in-one style antennas like our Puma 401 or Puma 42 or 221, so that they can get one single antenna punched through a wall, punched through a ceiling, something like that. Not have to have a whole bunch of different punches through whatever surface they're mounting to. And so, if you're putting it really just depends on where your other mesh Wi-Fi access points are. If you're running that all-in-one antenna outside, then you've got all your Wi-Fi antennas outside and up, somewhere conceivably. And so if you're meshing to other devices that are outside, to other buildings, things like that, that would work great. If you're trying to mesh to other things that are inside the building, then you're just going to have much less signal in that situation. So then you would want to look at maybe splitting that all-in-one into maybe using the paddle antennas for the Wi-Fi and only using cellular and GPS on the exterior. But just lots to consider there in terms of antenna configurations when you're trying to combine mesh and cellular or Wi-Fi and cellular into the same antenna. It's really just all about placement at the end of it. I see a question. What benefit is mesh if you have all of your access points wired? There is no benefit, frankly, unless you're going to need to make one of those access points wireless. So that really is the rule of mesh. That is absolutely my policy. If you can run Ethernet to it without headache and you expect it to run all day, every day, 24/7 with lots of users, I would wire it. Mesh is great. Mesh gives you tons of flexibility and it helps you solve those problems that you can't solve with a wire. But if you can get a wire there, do it. It will work better long-term for you. There's just so many variables in wireless that plugging it in over Ethernet is always the better choice if that's a practical one.